Today is a day of a tale of tales that the world know very well. But to them that the story is told about forever remains a tale. But on this joyous day of days, what was lost have now been found. Them who helped to uncover the truth will live in the world renowned. Return of the King, return of the King, make way, make way, make way. Return of the King, return of the King, forever where he may reign. Time waits for no one, 'cause everyone's subject to time. From tales of God to tales of men, therein your answer will lie. Return to the King, return to the King, make way, make way, make way. Return to the King, return to the King, forever where he may reign. Greetings, 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 greetings. It is I, your King, King Clifford Jefferson, a senator from Godfrey, the fifth caravan Jew, son of folk, ruler of Jerusalem. I am the reincarnation of King Edgar the Peaceful. I'm here today with my queen, Sister Godwinson from the House of Godwinson, as well as my archbishops, Archbishop Belmont, our C.A. Murphy from the House of Murphy, as well as our Esquire, Brother Burgess from the House of Burgess, as well as our other nobles here today from their respective houses, as well as our countesses, Officer Countess Walker, and the other countesses are here beside her. We wish you all a wonderful day. We're here today with another marvelous lesson from the English Church of England. I studied hard for this, so I hope all those who are attending have your boots strapped on, because we're definitely going to travel some ground today. Greetings to you all. Let me just go name by name. So I'll be official: Archbishop Belmont, Brother Burgess, C.A. Murphy, Brother Scott from the House of Scott, Countess Walker from the House of Walker. We have Countess Middleton from the House of Middleton, Countess Erica Allen from the House of Allen. We have Brother Noble Means from the House of Means, Brother Noble Gray from the House of Gray, Brother Noble Harris from the House of Harris. Did I get everybody?
Sounds about right.
Okay, that's good. Greetings to you all today on this marvelous day. I'll let Archbishop get a formal addressing, and then we can get on with this marvelous lesson. And with that, I digress. Queen, you want to say a couple of words?
Just looking forward to another beautiful lesson from the King and King's Bench. Just want to say to everybody, once again, there's a lot of distractions out here. I feel like the church as a whole, we've come a long ways as far as, our learning and understanding. But as a people, I feel like we're so far behind as well. Just want to say, please, please, please pay attention to today's lesson, and it'll be well learned. With that, I digress.
Well said, Queen. It's beautiful to have a queen on your side, to understand the turmoil that a king has to go through. People look lightly upon that word. We are just individuals being subject to the law that's being implemented by the king. That's why it's called king and parliament. King is not to rule the people. King is supposed to protect the people. The people supposed to protect the king, as well as the people supposed to rule with the king. Because whatever the king does, the people benefit from the king. This is the reason why we had this problem, because the king and the people of the days of the past of our ancestors have become selfish. Very selfish. You see it today. No one want to give any patronage, no homage, no assistance, and and they expect something from something that they didn't even know. So with this lesson, please, each and every one of us sitting here, as well as those who are viewing this lesson, don't find yourself in a selfishness position with what you assume that you say you have, because that's why we become selfish, because of the pride of what we have. We don't want to give because it's the only thing I got. Well, you put yourself subject to be taken when you so-called only have what you got and nobody else have it. If you share, then you ain't got to worry about somebody taking it from you. Otherwise, that y'all can coexist together. This is a selfish world. And with that, I'll let Archbishop say a couple of words. For all those on the panel, I'll save your disposition to the end of the class, if that'd be all right with y'all as well. Everybody agree to that?
Agreed.
Okay, Archbishop, you got the floor.
Greetings, everyone, from the Kingdom of England, Empire of Albion, which have now been known as Great Britain. This is, one of the greatest times for us to be alive. First, I want to give honors to our King and Queen, Queen Godwin from the House of Godwin, King Clifford Jefferson from Royal House of Plantagenet, as well as our King Edgar the Peaceful, reincarnated and spirit is here, guiding our King, as well as the Third Temple English Church of England, to bring this truth to the world for those who need to hear it the most. The day is December 4th, 2972 Berber calendar, which is equivalent to the 2022 Gregorian calendar. These lessons are tailor fit for those people who want to actually make a change in the world. And, like the King said, we live amongst a lot of selfish people, a lot of folks who lack affection, who only want to be able to give based off of a transaction, i.e. having a transactional or commercial mindset. If you naturally produce by utilizing your God-given talent, and our talent is to be able to bring this information to you, then you'll be able to share that amongst your kith and kin to be able to live amongst each other in harmony instead of feeling like, you're losing something. Because without the church, you're completely lost. And that's the reason why we have come back to resurrect you in the proper state of mind. So therefore you no longer be lost. But like the King said, what you say or feel is yours, you must contribute to it. You must take care of, you must maintain and preserve. And with that comes you and your contribution. So with that being said, I digress, and we can get prepared for this beautiful lesson that's made and set for us to be able to set ourselves free. I digress.
Well said, Archbishop. For all those viewing today, I do speak a lot, quite fast, and I do speak passionately, but for the sake of interpretation, I try to slow down because it's definitely a magnificent lesson. It took me a couple of days to download, and then it took me a couple of days to digest what it is I was downloading, and then it took me a couple of days to actually be able to present it. And this is the fulfillment of what it is. So this is a three-step process for us as English nationals: belief, faith, and fruition. I had a belief in what was being taught here at the English Third Temple Church, and this developed in what you call your faith, of what we teach here at the English Third Temple Church. And by reviewing by faith what you receive here based off your belief, the fruition aspect has now bear forth fruit because you're still here. Can everybody agree?
Agreed.
Okay, so without further ado, let's get busy. This case right here is it's not new. We already spoke about this. Town of Paulette versus Clark. For those who will be on this lesson, please write this case down because it's paramount. This case deals with a gentleman by the name of Bennington Winsworth. Bennington Winsworth was a merchant, and he gave out land grants. Now, we must understand that all the 13 colonies under the British Crown was functioning under what we call a rump parliament. And a rump parliament is, in the same language, a commonwealth or a council of state. And it's a result of what we call an interregnum. We'll go through these words shortly. But the basis of this class is based off case law. Case law is Statutes, and Statutes is common law. And the common law, according to Statutes, Smith versus Alabama, says there's only one common law, and that is the common law of England. That was adopted by the several states and applied as their local laws, and must be looked at in light of the history of that law. That's called the language of the law. Everybody say that. Language of the law.
The language of the law.
Everybody say it. Shout out. Language of the law.
Language of the law.
Language of the law.
Language of the law.
All right. So this is the language of the law. The language, as we can see, is in English letters. Am I right?
Yes.
It's in English words, right? So that's right up our alley. It ain't in no other official language. It's not in no other national language. It's not based off any other national law. Because this is American English case law, but there's no such thing as American. There's a such thing as English, but there's no such thing as American, because America doesn't have a national language. It doesn't even have an official language, which means that it's stateless. Does that make sense to everybody?
Follow.
Yes, it does.
Now, I'm just, as I said, I had to digest it to be able to articulate it and give it back to you. Now, this is just the easy part for me. Y'all still have the hard part. You know what I'm saying? Just because I'm saying this don't mean you're gonna be able to articulate it like I'm saying it. So please pay attention. Town of Paulette, which was the original land grants, which was the actual land grants which caused the Revolutionary War. Land grants that were given by this proprietor named Bennington Wentworth is where the state of Vermont comes from, New Hampshire. These land grants that were given by this proprietor consist of the Northern Territories. At this time, they were called provinces. We had the middle colonies, the northern colonies, and the southern colonies. They were all provinces under what we call the crown jurisdiction. When you say the crown, you're saying crown land. When you're saying crown land, you're talking about the personification of the king. Because the crown land, which is personification of the king, denotes to the property that belongs to the church. Because the church is a non-natural person. And all the property belongs to the church concerning this case law. The purpose intent for the land is the church. Because to not have a church state or what we call a religious state, or what we call a state polity for us, because they separating church and state. On the state level and the United States level, they separated church from state. So there's no state polity or state religion. There's a state belief, but there's no state religion, because the language of the people governs the language of the law. Now, here in the States or United States, predominantly all of us speak English as a spoken language. And other nationalities who have their own national language and official language don't use that. They over here and they speak English as a spoken language. United States and the States have no official language, nor a national language, but the official language that's spoken here is English. Can everybody understand that?
Follow.
Agreed.
Okay. At the time of the proprietors, all the jurisdiction of the land grants given by the proprietors were grants given by the crown. The crown is the land, because the crown was called crown land. Overseas possessions, commonwealths, states, outlying territories are all considered crown land. And crown land is entail, which means it's hereditary. It's inheritable because it belongs to the church. The head of the church is the monarch. That's called the king. And the laws governing the church is its legislation or constitution or acts or rules or regulations, because the language of the law guarantees the language of the proceedings. The language of the law determines the language of the proceedings. And we're going to use this Time of Paulette versus Clark to show you the language of the law, which governs the language of the proceedings in a court of law. The language of the law governs the language of the proceedings in a court of law. That's the only way you can go past go, is the proceedings. Proceed means to go. So when you got two parties having a complaint against each other, and the language of the communication by the language of the law is brought forth by both parties to communicate with the judge. Now, we as English nationals speak English. The parties that we're bringing claims against are not English nationals. They're administrative employees. So they don't have a language of their own. They don't have an official language nor a national language. So the only language they can have is what they call an administrative language. Because the official language is not a spoken language. It's a language governing governing the government, whether it's the legislative, the judicial, or the administrative. Once again, the national language and the official language is a language governing the government, whether it's legislative, judicial, or administrative. Whether you speak it in Chinese, whether you speak it in Portuguese, whether you speak it in Spanish, they have their own official language and their natural language that governs the language of the proceedings in their courtrooms. Does that make sense to everybody?
Follow.
Because the courtrooms are sitting on the land. So if there's an issue in regards to the lands that involves two parties on a claim on the land, then it must be brought where? In a court of law. So the only thing we can use to reference that is this court case, Town of Paulette. And in the court case of Town of Paulette, we gave the description was the case about land grants given by a plaintiff named Bennington Wentworth, and other claim, the defendants claimed that the territory given out as grants by Bennington Wentworth belonged to New York communities, i.e. colonies, i.e. settlements that were given to him by a land grant by Charles II descendant, Duke of York, on March 12, 1664. That was, did you find that in New Jersey Revised Statute 46:3-1? March 12, 1664 was under what we call the province of New Jersey. The province of New Jersey. If you watched our previous lessons, you would already know that. But the base of the complaint, we're going to go to it for the sake of time. In this case, the judicial review of the court stated, individual societies may possess the same land, have the same mode of worship, and the same ordinance administered in the same manner, and submit to the same discipline, as far as may be effected without the assistance of a civil arm, i.e. military rule, i.e. an arbitrator, i.e. administrative government. But this constitutes, in the view we are now taking of the subject, it only exists by way of similarity, but not identity. In similarity, in likeness, and resemblance of, i.e. de facto, but not in identity. DEJURE. It furnishes no ground for legal derivation of civil or legal connection. Now, we're not talking about a theocracy or belief or secular, because we're talking about land belonging to a religious society. And the judge is trying to make a distinction on what religious society, person, or institution was the one as designed in the original contract, i.e. the language of the law. Because at the demise of the crown, the property associated with the attributes and the prerogatives of the king transfers to another successor heir without what we call an interregnum, a pause in the transfer of that sovereign power. But here we see a pause in that sovereign power because there's no monarchs. They're only proprietors who's making claims on land as what we have here today. Now, all royal colonies are property of the crown. All royal colonies are property of the crown, whether they're land, buildings, or fixtures. So what that says is that nobody can be using it. You're not supposed to be using it if it's property of the crown. Everything attached to the crown. Land use means the management, the modifying of the natural environment or the wilderness to create settlements for new environments. That's called settlement or residency. When you take residence, you settle somewhere. This is the identity of a colonist, such as the one you're reading about. Making claims on land, but look what the court said. It stated that it furnishes no ground for legal derivation of a civil legal connection to the identity. Similarity, but not the identity. Why is this so? Because it says in this case, in every political, civil, and legal view in the eyes of that court, based off the legal language and the language of the law, and in all civil and legal consequences, the dissolution of the Church of England, as by law established, was under the United States as total and complete on the revolution as that of the civil powers of the British government. Did everybody understand what that just said? Everybody understand? No questions about that?
No, I don't understand.
Okay. It says that the societies who exist, I'm just giving you a summary or syllabus of what they're saying. Based off this, somebody was making a claim on land, such as Bennington Wentworth, as well as all the other colonies. I don't care what type of community, what church, what society, what institution, what administrative government, whoever it is, from this time of this case till presently. The judges at this particular time stated that on the subject, and their view of the subject, which is right here. You see that, Sister Walker? In the view of the subject that they're now taking, the subject is based off the language of the proceedings, which is based off the arguments brought forth by both parties. All right? We're not either a defendant or a plaintiff because we're the ones who own the land. We're the original people or nation or institution or assembly that this land belongs to, and the court is trying to make a determination of who this land belongs to, because the same people who are making this claim still exist today. You go right now on every street corner and see an Episcopalian church. You go right now and see a Protestant church on every corner. You go right now and see a Roman Catholic church on every corner. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So these people are taking on the similarity of the Church of England. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And similarity, but not in identity. And they only taking two classifications: United States government and the British government. That exists before that is foggy to us. We don't know nothing about that until I came on the scene. None of that was made clear. The only thing you know about is from what the United States did, what the British colonists did under the British crown, and that's as far as they go. Because it just said it. In every political, civil, and legal bill, and all civil and legal consequences, the dissolution means interregnum. When all the assets of the church are put into a trust, wasn't King Henry VIII a king? He was a king. He put all that church property into a trust and said that no other person can get these assets that belongs in this trust but the original owners of it. The original owners of it is the members of the Church of England, not the Episcopalian Church, who's called themselves the Church of England, because that's what's being disputed right here. The court saying every political, remember, it ain't based off a religious belief. What you believe in. They believe, just like King James believed that he had a right to become king of England by divine right of by the right of kings. He's saying God came out the sky and told him, I have the right to become your king. The people look at him like he crazy. I didn't see no God come out the sky. According to English history, didn't no gods come out the sky. The kings was right here, and they told you, this is going to be my successor, my heir. And when I die, all the power I got goes to him for the benefit of the community, i.e. the king's realm. Does that make sense?
Follow.
But instead here, as by legal and through civil and legal proceedings and every political, civil, legal view and all civil legal consequences, the dissolution, i.e. the transfer of the sovereign power of the Church of England under the king as by law established was in the United States as total and complete at the American Revolution. And that of the civil power of the British government. So that means the United States government and the British government took the Church of England out the picture. Does that make sense?
Follow.
Sister Walker, you follow?
Follow.
And it was all on one accord.
They were supposed to be all one accord, but we know that the Church of England under the British government was under who? The House of Stuart. They was from the House of Stuart. They were called the pretenders. A pretender. All right, let's move forward. So that's case law that people can refer to. Language of the proceedings. Countess Walker, read, if you don't mind, read wherever I point to. If you don't mind, you feel like reading?
Yes, King.
Okay, I don't want nobody to do anything they don't want to. But as English citizen, it's our obligation to show our allegiance by participation. Am I right?
Yes, King.
Right.
Okay. For all those who are viewing this, people say language. First, let's go here. Official language. Read the first paragraph, Countess Walker.
Official language, not to be confused with national language. An official language is a language given supreme status in a particular country, state, or other jurisdiction. Typically, the term official language does not refer to the language used by a people or country, but by its government. For example, judiciary, legislature, and/or administration.
Everybody understand that. When they say official language, it's not talking about the spoken language of a people. It's talking about the language of a government, i.e. either judiciary, legislative, or administration. Everybody understand that?
Follow.
The administration is supposed to follow the laws of the legislation, and if they don't follow the laws of the legislation, then you take them to the judiciary. The judiciary is obligated to follow the laws of the legislature. And the legislature sets the standard for all of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that meant that if the administration has any authority, it must be judicially sound and must be legislatively backed. All right, so official language, then we have a national language. Read in the United States. This is under national language.
Okay, in the United States, English, American English is the national language only in an informal sense, by numbers and by historical and contemporary association. The United States Constitution does not explicitly declare any official language, although the Constitution is written in English as in all federal legislation.
Okay, something wrong with that. So they just told you on the state and federal level, it has no official language, it has no national language. So it's stateless. Why is it stateless? But why is the language spoken? The language is considered the de facto language because ain't no English people here to speak it as the original language. That was makes it de facto. Everybody understand? And in England, the language is de jure. It's supposed to be de jure, but it's itself is de facto. Why? Because there ain't no English national over there. It's the same people over there as is over here. White, black, African American, and every other nationality, who all got their own national language. But their English is not in the picture. So if they're not in the picture, you can't have their language of the proceedings because you don't have the language of the law. And the only thing now you're subject to is the administrative language. That takes us back here.
So are they saying that the English language is not the official language spoken here because it's not the majority language?
No.
It's the majority, but there's so many other languages that they can't pinpoint it to one specific language?
No, that would call regional. That's what you call a regional language.
Okay.
When other people here speak other languages to be able to communicate, but the official language here and what we call the state of the United States has no official language or national language as well. So the only language that they can use is administrative, but spoken in the English tongue. So they're speaking English, but on the administrative language.
It's 1 o'clock.
And the administrative language is what they call legalese. That's called the language of lawyers. That's a language that they learn in bar schools, law schools, colleges that deals with law. They speak legalese. We speak legal English.
Lawful.
Legal English is called plain English or plain language. Give me an example of plain English or plain language. How we talking now? Give me an example of legalese. I'll motion to have a cheeseburger made if the court see fit. If there's any opposition on it, I'll motion that you move to strike. That's legalese talk.
Do you understand? Is legal
Do
ease.
you understand? And you say, yeah, you don't understand a damn word they saying because you find no remedy according to who you say you are. You at the mercy of the court. Because the language of the proceedings allow you to proceed. Now, what does it define language of the proceedings is? Go ahead and read, Countess Walker.
Okay, language of the proceedings, definition and context. The language of proceedings is the language in which parties communicate with the judges or arbitrators and make their written and oral submissions, with few exceptions. The language of proceedings affects the parties' ability to participate and access the justice delivered by the intended forum. Domestic courts are bound by the official language of their state. Therefore, the use of interpreters is required to ensure due process.
Read that again. Read that part 3 again.
Okay. The language of proceedings affects the parties' abilities to participate and assess the justice delivered by the intended forum. Domestic courts are bound by the official language of their state. Therefore, the use of interpreters is required to ensure due process.
I'll stop right there. So it says that the language of the proceeding affects our party's ability to communicate with the court, i.e. the judge, based off your argument. It said, but the domestic courts are obligated to go by the official language of the state. Now, the state has no official language. No state, well, some states do have official language, which is English. Some don't, some do, but the language is English. So if it's English, then it must be based off the English law, because that's the only way you're going to be able to proceed in court. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so if the domestic courts are bound by the official language of their state, and the official language of their state is English, and we know English is what we call plain English or plain language, right? So we go into a courtroom and you talk like we talking like we do on the street, and you go in the courtroom talking like judges and attorneys. That's not plain language, so it's not legal English. That's what we call legalese. That imposes a burden on you because you didn't go to law school. That's not the language of your national legislation. How we know that? Read part 3. I mean, continue on and read what they say.
International courts and international arbitral tribunals, however, must identify the language of proceedings for each case that opposes parties of different linguistic backgrounds.
Stop. So it's your obligation to make that judge tell you what is the language of these proceedings. It's your obligation. If you don't ask that, he's going to determine for himself what is the language of the proceedings. And $100, I'll tell you, is administrative. Because administrative official language is either the language of the government, either it's legislative, judiciary, or administrative. The judiciary is governed by the legislature, which is the Constitution, because the Constitution makes the checks and balances for the executive, legislative, and judicial. Administrative is nowhere in there. Everybody follow? So the language of the court proceedings is why you ask, it's just constitutional language? Because I don't hear any language in this courtroom that you're talking about that's constitutional. Everything I'm hearing right now is administrative, and I don't know that language. Because I wanted to know that language, I had to go to law school. And I never went to law school. So it puts me at a disadvantage. It says right here that domestic courts are bound by their official language. Your official language is, predominantly speaking, is English. Because administrative language don't have a spoken language. Or do they? If you're saying this do, then it's legalese. If it don't, then the only thing you can go off in this courtroom for me to be able to articulate and communicate with you is what you're speaking now, English. And when you speak English, you speak like we're speaking now, simple English, or what we call plain English, and what we call that the 4 C's. Clear, correct, concise, and complete. I'm gonna say it again. Clear, correct, concise, and complete. It leaves no room for ambiguity. Everybody follow?
Follow.
Okay. Everybody write that down, then you can continue, Sister Walker, Countess Walker.
The language barrier constitutes a practical and legal obstacle for the efficient organization of international judicial proceedings.
Stop. So without knowing the language of proceedings, it causes or constitute a practical barrier. It limits your ability to participate in the courtroom or receive participation or adequate justice in that independent forum. So you must build a language of the proceedings. And since you don't have no official language or national language, then you have the ability to call upon your national legislation as the language you use in the proceedings to draw your presumption. I didn't say that, they said this. Read the impact of the language.
Impact of the language of proceedings. The language of proceedings in international arbitration is directly related to the efficiency of the award, partly equally and
Equality.
fundamental right of due process.
Okay, so the language of the proceedings denotes to you getting due process of law in the courtroom. And due process of law has to be based off the language of the law, right? And since they don't have official language to determine their official law, you have the right to call upon your own. That takes us to B. Read what B said.
National legislation. National legislation gives the parties the right to choose the language of their proceedings or set a simple presumption in favor of the local language.
Stop. So if the local language is English, then you good to go, am I right? You good to go. If you speak in English and I speak English and you don't have no optional official language of your own nor national language, then I have the right to call upon my national legislation, because if I don't, then I'm subject to this administrative language under the administrative legislation, which I know that's what you're practicing. That makes sense to everybody.
Follow.
Yes.
You ain't even got into the subject matter. Well, why you was brought in that courtroom for it? Because you can't get into it until you establish the language of the proceedings.
Correct.
Continue to go. Who determines the language of proceedings in absence of agreement? Go ahead.
Okay. States usually determine the language of proceedings in the instrument of their agreement regarding disputes that are not governed by a determined arbitral institution.
Okay. Arbitral is administrative. If it's not administrative, it must be constitutional. Because arbitrary is like it's like a bench trial. It's like a third party, a neutral party. It wasn't elected, it's just appointed. Read what the next one says.
Arbitral institutions are overwhelmingly in favor of party autonomy in selection of the language of proceedings as confirmed by arbitration rules as well as by case law.
Okay, so they already tell you that the court won't be biased because they're going by arbitrary rules and backed by case law, which governs the language of the proceedings, which allows the ability for them to go on and do what they do. Remember, challenging jurisdiction means challenging the law.
Adjudicate erroneously.
Yes, sir. Well said. And let's go to one more. How is the language proceedings determined in the absence of agreement?
Okay, determining the language of proceedings can be based on the circumstances of the case as well as set forth in arbitral rules as found by arbitral tribunals, based solely on the language of the contract, either as a deciding factor or simple presumption, based on the official language of the institution. Rules can also remain silent with regards to how arbitrators shall determine the language of the proceeding.
Stop. So they just said rules may become silent until you establish the rules, because the rules is based upon the language. A rule is a policy is a law is a legislation, and legislation is what constitutes the authority to do something. Everybody follow? So if you opt out for the arbitrary, other than the origin of where the arbitrary rule comes from, then that's your choice. But it's up to you to argue the language of the proceedings, which is governed by the official language of that state. And since the state has no official language, you have the right to derive upon the national legislation, which gives you the ability to talk your language in that courtroom, even though it's an independent forum that's not in your best interest. How I know that? Let's move forward. All right. So since we English nationals, and we know that our ancestors' law came to an interregnum at the time of King James. Because prior to the British colonies, you had northern France, you had France and Spain dealing with the Eastern Hemisphere. The Western Hemisphere. That was France and Spain. Everybody agree to that?
Yes.
So we pretty much up to date with that. What's missing is what's happening on the East Coast. Everybody know we just had the United States versus Netherlands game yesterday, right?
Yes.
Soccer game. The United States lost to Netherlands in the soccer game. They played on November 3rd. What's the day? 4th? November 3rd was the day of the dissolution of the monastery done by Henry VIII. November the 3rd.
December 3rd.
The dissolution of what's the day? December 3rd was the dissolution of the monastery of the Church of England. November 3rd. So now the Church of England is where the property of the church, going back to the case, Count Paulette. Now that we were subject to the history, because King James styled himself as King James I, the first king of England, under what we call Parliament. King James became king in 1603. Now, I find that mighty strange. Why do I say that? Let's go ahead. Where is that? Anglo-French Wars. These are all the Anglo and French wars that existed. The Anglo, read this part in your clothing, Countess Walker.
The Anglo-French Wars were a series of conflicts between England and, after 1707, Britain and France, including.
Now they give you the Middle Ages, right? They go right to the Middle Ages, and the first thing they say It's the Capitan Plantagenet rivalry. Right? Now, what's the Capitan Plantagenet rivalry? Well, the first paragraph, just read this for us. Read that.
The Capitan Plantagenet rivalry was a series of conflicts and disputes that covered a period of 100 years, 1159 to 1259, during which the House of Capet, rulers of the Kingdom of France, fought the House of Plantagenet, also known as the House of Anjou, rulers of the Kingdom of England, to suppress the growing power of the Plantagenet controlled Angevin
Empire.
Okay, some historians refer to that series of events as the First 100 Years' War.
Okay, stop right there, stop right there. Now, if you look at the results, you see all these wars, Treaty of Paris, Angevin King, Plantagenet, blah, 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 keep going down. Territory, Kingdom of France, Normandy, Maine, Anjou, Touraine, Poitiers, blah, blah, blah. Now, it says that, oh, where's that? Up here. Where's Edward the First? Edward the First. One second, let me find it. I can move forward. Let me move forward. Okay, let's go ahead. So we see that the Anglo-French Wars start with the Capitan Plantagenet rivalry. Now we're gonna go right here and trace these wars down, and we're gonna go all the way up to the Edwardian Wars. Right here. How many ages? Where I look at it. Right here. Everybody see this? Anglo-French Wars. The 100-Year War, we just read about it in peripheral conflict, often broken up into the Edwardian Wars, the Caroline Wars, and the Lancastrian Wars. This is called the War of the Roses. Everybody follow?
Follow.
The Edwardian Wars, that took place between Edward the First, Edward the Second, and Edward the Third. You see his name right there, right? Right there, King Edward the Third of England. That was the last. Once those wars broke out, everything went haywire. So our job is to fix where it went wrong at. This is the gap between King Edward III. How we know that? Let's go to the actual legislation. The English Constitution. So these are all the laws of the English constitutional history. And it say British, it said English. From William I, William the Conqueror, all the way down to Queen Victoria. All right, we know ours start right here with Edward III. It start right there. So let's go to Edward III. These are all the laws passed by Edward III. We're gonna go to specific ones. What one I want to go to? The perseverance of the pleadings in English. Very important because they speak in English in these courtrooms, but the language of the proceedings in the courtroom as official language is administrative, and we don't understand that mess. So therefore, we had a disadvantage. So we get to go back to our national legislation, which is acts of parliament, that we can use in this courtroom to set a presumption and lieu of the local language. Didn't it say that? Okay, so let's go to 1361. Edward III. Act of 1362 first. We're gonna do 1362 first, because both of these were all these acts were passed by Edward III. This one we're gonna look at is perseverance of the English to be used in the courtroom, 2678. Countess Middleton, you can take off from here. Thank you, Countess Walker, for reading.
Okay, one moment.
Is that too big? Or?
Let's see. This part right here. It's called perseverance of the English to be used in the courts of law. This was passed by Edward III. This is the reference number. Let me blow it up some.
78.
Okay. No, read 70. Yeah, 78. 1 second.
Okay.
That's it right there. Everybody write that down.
78. Purveyance, English to be used in the courts, etc.
All right, we're gonna go right here to 15. Read 15.
Item, because it is often showed to the king by the prelates, dukes, earls, barons, and all the commonalty of the great mischiefs which have happened to divers of the realm, because the laws, customs, and statutes of this realm be not commonly known in the same realm, for that they be pleaded, showed, and judged in the French tongue, which is much unknown in the said realm, so that the people which do implead or be impleaded in the king's court and in the courts of other have no knowledge nor understanding of that which is said for them or against them by their sergeants and other pleaders, and that reasonably the said laws and customs shall be the more soon learned and known, and better understood in the tongue used in the said realm, and by so much every man of the said realm may the better govern himself without offending of the law, and the better keep, save, and defend his heritage and possessions, and in diverse regions and countries where the king, the nobles, and other of the said realm have been good governance, and full right is done to every person, because that their laws and customs be learned and used in the tongue of the country. The king, desiring the good governance and tranquility of his people, and to put out and eschew the harms and mischiefs which do or may happen in this behalf by the occasions aforesaid, hath ordained and established by the assent aforesaid, that all pleas which shall be pleaded in his court whatsoever, or in the courts and places of any other lords whatsoever within the realm, shall be pleaded, showed, defended, and answered, debated, and judged in the English tongue, and that they be entered and enrolled in Latin, and that the laws and customs of the same realm, terms, and processes be holden and kept as they be, and have been before this time, and that by the ancient terms and form of pleaders no man be prejudiced, so that the matter of the action be fully showed in the declaration and in the writ. And it is accorded by the assent aforesaid, that this ordinance and statute of pleading begin and hold place at the 15th of St. Hilary next coming.
Okay, so what it's saying is that the language of the courts, based off the official language that the court should be using to interpret the proceedings, should be in the English tongue, not just what we speak in, but the language of the law of the English people who speak the English tongue. Everybody follow?
Wow.
And it's commanding them in the courtroom. So if it's the commandment is for those in the court, we need to go to the laws that govern the justice of the peace in those courts. This takes us right here. Where's that?
77.
An act concerning justice of the peace. So we just read 78. Let's go to 77. Remember, we're reading these acts of the king, not King George, not Edward III, not Edward II, or any person who's set in the position of king, but the station itself. If there is no interregnum, meaning that the power transfers to the king without any gap in between reigns, that means that the king's law is always active. The only reason why it's not active because ain't no physical body that's sitting in that station. And that's because of the Commonwealth, which we're going to get to in a second. Read that, Countess Middleton.
Okay. No, an act concerning justices of the peace. First, that in every county of England shall be assigned for the keeping of the peace, one lord, and with him 3 or 4 of the most worthy in the country, with some learned in the law, And they shall have power to restrain the offenders, rioters, and all other barrators, and to pursue, arrest, take, and chastise them according their trespass or offense, and to cause them to be imprisoned and duly punished according to the law and customs of the realm, and according to that which to them shall seem best to do by their discretions and good advisement, and also to inform them and to inquire of all those that have been pillars and robbers in the parts beyond the sea, and be now come again and go wandering, and will not labor as they were wont in times past, and to take and arrest all those that they may find by indictment or by suspicion, and to put them in prison, and to take of all them that be not of good fame, where they shall be found, sufficient surety and main prize of their good behavior toward the king and his people, and the other duly to punish.
Stop
To
right
the-
there. So we don't need to read we don't need to read nothing else. That's the obligation that King Edward III stated, that the justice of the peace, i.e. magistrate, i.e. judge, is supposed to continue in office even at the demise of the crown. And that the language of the court should be in English so that the parties there receive due process of law. Everybody understand it?
Follow.
So according to this writ given by the king, and being that there is no interregnum in the king, this law is still active. Why? Because we are these kings' descendants. This law applies to us. So the language of the procedure in the courtroom should be based off the law of the language of the pleadings in English, as instructed from the minor, i.e. King Edward III, to you magistrate judges. And that will govern or determine how the proceedings are to go from here on out. Because you have the right to do what? Call upon the nation's legislation in lieu of establishing your legal presumption in lieu of the local language. And the local language is what? English.
English.
It's not administrative. If it's administrative, then the magistrate judge is to lock himself up if he's doing something contrary to what this act says. Because you are a justice of the peace. So you show me how you went off court, because America adopted the common law and the language of the common law. So if you hold it and sit up there in the seat and I read this act that keeps all these justices of the peace in check, then what the hell are you doing? That means that you need to be locked up or recuse yourself based off this act right here, and which we're calling upon in lieu of guaranteeing our due process of law, which is by way of establishing the language of the proceedings, by establishing the language of the law. Does that make sense? You see how when I articulate that, I stay with the same language. I don't move from that argument. Everybody follow? But I'm telling you how this is stopped. Let's go to another act. So that was in 2 acts created by acts of parliament under the Plantagenet crown. Let's move forward through history. Richard II, Henry IV, Henry V, this is the House of Tudors. Henry VI, Edward VII, Fourth, Richard III, Henry VII, Henry VIII, House of Tudors, y'all. Edward VII, sixth, Mary I, Elizabeth, James I, Charles I. This is under what we call the divine right of kings. This is called Jacobism, under the Jacobites. Jacobites were descendants of the 12 tribes of Israel, because Jacob changed his name to Israel when he wrestled with the angelic beings, i.e. the Anglo-Saxons. Now I'm going to show you that the word Judas is the same name as Judah. We're going to get to that in a second. But these are laws of James I, who was assumed to be the first king of England. He was the 6th king of Scotland and the 1st king of England. His national language was not English. His national language is what? Scottish.
Scottish.
But why did he write the book in English if he's Scottish? And if Scottish got the national language, then the national language of Scottish is what they call lowlander language. Scottish language is called lowlander language. But we see I remember from my house, brother Scott, he's an Englishman. How can we prove who's wrong? Who has the better claim? King James or brother Scott? We're gonna prove brother Scott got a better claim to him. How do we know that? Because when King James took place, he took place over here by way of here. From James I to Charles II, we got into what we call the Glorious Revolutionary War, or the English Civil War. All right, from King James I, soon to be the first king of England, Charles I, he got executed. That's a rump parliament. That's called a Commonwealth. The Commonwealth started here in 1649, right here. 1649, when Charles II, they were going over who would inherit the crown. King James, Charles I was executed. Then comes Charles II. Charles II was restored to the crown in 1660. In 1660, Charles II was restored to the crown. He made claim to the eastern coast called Dutch. It was under the control of Netherlands, i.e. the Dutch. So before Charles II inherited the colonies of the eastern seaboard, all this was under the control of the Dutch, under what we call the Anglo and Dutch Wars. So in 1648 and 1649, we're into what we call a Commonwealth. A Commonwealth is also, in other words, we call a council of state. A council of state or a Commonwealth is actually one and the same. You got Commonwealths today and you have states today. So they're one and the same. They're stateless nations, because they have no official language of their own, nor a national language on the state level or on the federal level, because the federal level is under the jurisdiction of the United States government, which is the federal government. Can everybody agree?
Follow.
Where's the seat of the federal government, everybody?
DC.
Washington, D.C.,
What is Washington, D.C. named after?
the District of Columbia, after George Washington.
Named after George Washington. Everybody keep that in mind. So in 1649, you have what they call the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth, or what they call the Council of State, which is called the Privy Council. The Privy Council is called the King's Council. The Commonwealth or the King's Council or the Privy Council is all a part of the Commonwealth, which is called an interregnum. Let's just look that up right quick. British interregnum. Sister Middleton, you can read here.
The British Interregnum. The interregnum in the British Isles began with the execution of Charles I in January 1649, and from September 1651 in Scotland, and ended in May 1660 when his son Charles II was restored to the thrones of the three realms, although he had already been acclaimed king in Scotland since 1649. During this time, the monarchical system of government was replaced with the Commonwealth of England.
Everybody see that, right? I didn't say that. She didn't say that. All she did was read what they said. So the Commonwealth of England is what they call an interregnum, which means a gap between the monarchs. So if there's a gap between the monarchs, how in the hell is these kings are ruling? Because it's a one parliament. You got the de facto monarch and you got the de jure monarch. If there was a de jure monarch, then there will be no interregnum. There will be no Commonwealth. There will be no civil council of state. It will only be parliament, king and parliament. But because of the interregnum, the demise of the crown couldn't transfer like it was supposed to. We just read what the Commonwealth is. Let's go back to what the demise of the crown means. Read this, Countess Middleton.
Demise of the crown is the legal term in the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth realms for the transfer of the crown upon the death of the monarch. The crown transfers automatically to the monarch's heir.
Stop.
Okay.
Stop. So it just said, demise of the crown means the transfer of the attributes and privileges to a monarch's successor heir. It didn't say just successor, it said a successor heir. Now, we just read in the town of Paulette that the United States dissolved the Church of England, and the United States became successor to the crown. How did the United States become successor to the crown? Because the United States came by way of what we call the Residency Act of 1790. When you were resident, that means you become a colonizer. So that means when the United States was created by way of the Residency Act, they became residents, and everybody who associated with the United States. And the United States just represents the land that's being regulated through eminent domain powers, under police powers, through what the United States call right of discovery. Eminent domain means that they just got here and it was like it was. So we're gonna take use of it until the owner come back. The owner ain't here because of this interregnum, because the demise of the crown did not take effect. Continue to read, says Countess Middleton.
Okay.
Right, the concept.
The concept evolved in the Kingdom of England and was continued in Great Britain and then the United Kingdom. The concept also became part of the constitutions of the British colonies and was continued in the constitutions of the Commonwealth realms until modified within those realms.
Very important. So it says that the demise of the crown, which is not a bad thing. Demise means the transfer of the sovereign power, prerogative, and attributes of the king to an heir. But they talk about the transfer of that demise of the power under a commonwealth. It said the concept of demise started in England, then continued to Great Britain, and then United Kingdom, and then to the British colonies, under the British monarchs, right? So let's go back to the laws of the English Constitution and see what it says. Under the Commonwealth. We have the appointment of the Council of State, right? The Council of State is under the Commonwealth. It's either a Commonwealth or Council of State or a Privy Council. They abolished the office of the king. Do y'all see that? Right there, 1648, under the Commonwealth, through the interregnum, they abolished the office of the king. Because if the office of the king was still open, then it will be a demise of the crown, a transfer to an heir. They can't do it because of the interregnum. A space or a gap between an heir, because ain't no heir. Why? Because they just abolished the office right here. Everybody see that? All this is under the Commonwealth. Then they also abolished what? The House of Lords. Did everybody see that?
Mm-hmm.
This is legislative authority. Now, when they did the Commonwealth and created the Council of State and abolished the office of the King and the House of Lords, look what happened. The act declared England to be a Commonwealth. Countess Allen, Countess Walker, you may read. Right here. Okay. Did Countess Walker read, or was that Countess Allen? Okay, Countess Allen, you may read now.
Act declaring England to be a commonwealth. Be it declared and enacted by this present Parliament and by the authority of the same, that the people of England and of all the dominions and territories thereunto belonging are and shall be and are hereby constituted, made, established, and confirmed to be a commonwealth and a free state, and shall from henceforth be governed as a commonwealth and free state by the supreme authority of this nation, the representatives of the people in Parliament, and by such as they shall appoint and constitute as officers and ministers under them for the good of the people, and that without any king or house of lords.
What? What do you mean without no king and no house of lords? So who the hell is governing the land? Oh, we got to go back, because what we just read here, we got to go back to this one then. First, let's go back here. How did it, because it just said without no king and no lord, house of lords. So let's go see how they abolished the king's office. Let's start there.
Now, point of interest, remember, Commonwealth is synonymous to republic.
Mm-hmm. So all y'all think y'all should live in the republic, you better think twice.
Wow.
Continue to read, Countess
Republic
out.
means nonconformist.
Allegorical.
Act, whereas Charles Stuart, late King of England, Ireland, and the territories and dominions thereunto belonging, hath by authority derived from Parliament been and is hereby declared to be justly condemned, adjudged to die, and put to death for many treasons, murders, and other heinous offenses committed by him, by which judgment he stood, and is hereby declared to be attainted of high treason, whereby his issue and posterity and all others pretending title under him are become incapable of the said crown, or of being king or queen of the said kingdom of dominions, or either or any of them, be it therefore enacted and ordained, and it is enacted, ordained, and declared by this present Parliament, and by authority thereof, that all the people of England and Ireland and the dominions and territories thereunto belonging, of what degree or condition soever, are discharged of all fealty, homage, and allegiance, which is or shall be pretended to be due unto any of the issue and posterity of the king of the said late king, or any claiming under him. And that Charles Stuart, eldest son, and James, called Duke of York, second son, and all other the issue and posterity of him, the said late king, and all and every person and persons pretending title from, by, or under him, are and be disabled to hold or enjoy the said crown of England and Ireland, and other dominions thereunto belonging, or any of them, or to have the name, title, style, or dignity of the king or queen of England and Ireland, Prince of Wales, or any of them, or to have and enjoy the power and dominion of the said kingdom and dominions, or any of them, or the honors, manors, land, tenement, possession, hereditaments, belonging or appertaining to the said crown of England and Ireland, and other dominions aforesaid, or to any of them, or to the Principality of Wales, Duchy of Lancaster or Cornwall, or any or either of them, any law, statute, ordinance, usage, or custom to the contrary hereof, in any wise notwithstanding.
Now stop. They just said from King James and anybody that come after him who are pretenders, they are not to be assumed to be or called by any title associated with that King of England. From King James to Charles I to Charles II to Duke of York, or either all the way up to Queen Victoria or Elizabeth II, All of those are pretenders because they got their transfer of authority through this rump parliament. Everybody follow? So that means a lot of people are going to jail based off this act right here. Continue to read.
2. And whereas it is and hath been found by experience that the office of a king in his nation and Ireland, and to have the power thereof in any single person, is unnecessary, burdensome, and dangerous to the liberty, safety, and public interest of the people, and that for the most part, use hath been made of the regal power and prerogative to oppress and impoverish and enslave the subject, and that usually and naturally any one person in such power makes it his interest to encroach upon the just freedom and liberty of the people, and to promote the setting up of their own will and power above the laws, that so they might enslave these kingdoms to their own lust, be it therefore enacted and ordained by this present parliament, and by authority of the same, that the office of a king in his nation shall not henceforth reside in or be exercised by any one single person, and that no one person whatsoever shall or may have or hold the office, style, dignity, power, or authority of king of the said kingdoms and dominions, or any of them, or of the Prince of Wales, any law, statute, usage, or custom to the contrary thereof, in any wise notwithstanding.
Stop. So they're saying that nobody, single person, can take that position as king as descended down from these kings. Now, when people read this one statute you just read, they're saying, well, can nobody use it? If they just dissolve the position of the king, then nobody can use it. That's not what Act Part 3 says. Read what Part 3 says. Countess Allen.
And it is hereby enacted that if any person or persons shall endeavor to attempt by force of arms or otherwise, or be aiding, assisting, comforting, or abetting unto any person or persons that shall by any ways or means whatsoever endeavor or attempt to reviving or setting up again of any pretended rights of the said Charles, eldest son, to the said late King James, called Duke of York, or of any other the issue and prosperity of the said late king, or of any person or persons claiming under him or them to the said regal office, style, dignity, or authority, or to be Prince of Wales, or the promoting of any one person whatsoever to the name, style, dignity, power, prerogative, or authority of King of England and Ireland and dominion aforesaid, or any of them, that they, every such offense, shall be deemed and adjudged high treason, and the offenders,
Boy.
their conciliars, precursors, aiders, and abettors, being convicted of the said offense, or any of them, shall be deemed and adjudged traitors against the Parliament and people of England, and shall suffer, lose, and forfeit, and have such like and the same pain, forfeitures, judgments, and execution as in use in case of high treason.
Somebody is in the world of trouble. Once they watch this video, somebody in the world of trouble. Why? Because we were Part 4 said.
Charles of England.
Trouble don't last always. Trouble don't last always. Let's go.
And whereas by the abolition of the kingly office provided for in this act, a most happy way is made for this nation, if God see it good, to return to its just and ancient right of being governed by its own representatives, or national meeting in council from time to time, chosen and entrusted for that purpose by the people. It is therefore resolved and declared by the commons assembled in parliament that they will put a period to the sitting of this present parliament and dissolve the same so soon as may possibly stand with the safety of the people that have betrusted them, and with what is absolutely necessary for the preserving and upholding the government now settled in the way of a commonwealth, and that they will carefully provide for the certain choosing, meeting, and sitting of the next future representative with such other circumstances of freedom in choice and equality in distribution of members to be elected thereunto, as shall most conduce to the lasting freedom and good of this commonwealth.
Okay. 16-1-28, New Jersey by statute says, rights state under the Charters of Great Britain, saved from repeal. Let's say that again. Rights state under the constitutions of Great Britain, saved from repeal. Because the word constitution means charter, and the word charter means constitution. And the only way it don't mean that if it's specifically define the word charter and constitution. It does not. So for us, under English language, charter means charter and constitution means constitution. So when we say act state, right state under the Charters of Great Britain, saved from repeal, an act to incorporate trustees of religious society for property held in religious corporations and place thereof. And it said property. So when it said property, we have to go to Title 46 because property means ownership. When you're saying ownership, you're saying property. When you're saying property, you're saying ownership. But the question is, what do you own? Well, under 46:3-2, 46:3-2, it says land, tenures, manors, hereditaments are all remain in free and common sockets as it was in the time of the King of England or other person, body politics, or corporate. Now, we just read under the Commonwealth that the King's station was dissolved. So how are we reading in the 2022 statute that station is not resolved in New Jersey? Why? Because the demise of the crown has never taken place. They want us to assume that it has not took place because of them not taking upon the king. When you can't do that, that means that you're going to be held for high treason. How we know that? Let's prove it. All right. Read demise of the crown again.
Demise of the crown is the legal term in the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth realms for the transfer of the crown upon the death of the monarch. The crown transfers automatically to the monarch's heir.
Stop. Okay, so it transfers to the monarch's heir. So what is the crown? Let's read that for all those viewers who don't know what the crown is.
The crown is the state in all its aspects within the jurisprudence.
Oh, I'm sorry. 1 second. What did I do?
Very tough.
Okay, here we go. Go ahead.
The crown is the state in all its aspects within the jurisprudence of the Commonwealth realms and their subdivisions, such as the crown dependencies over seas, territories, provinces, or states.
Stop. So wherever you're talking about, the crown means the land. Whether you want to call it a commonwealth or whether you want to call it a council of state, dependencies, overseas territories, provinces, we don't care what you call it. It's still crown land. How we know that? Let's go down and see. Let's see right here. Read this right here. The term.
The term is also found in various expressions such as crown land, which some countries refer to as public land or state land, as well as in some offices such as Minister of the Crown, Crown Authority, and Crown Prosecutor.
Okay, so all public land is crown land, but it's being used under public land use regulations under police powers called eminent domain of what we call fee and simple. Fee and simple is not is quiet use of land, but it's not ownership, because ownership is intel. Why? Because that's what Crown Land defined as. Don't believe us, read it for yourself. Continue, Council Howard.
Crown land, sometimes spelled crown land, also known as royal domain, is a territorial area belonging to the monarch who personifies the crown.
Read that again. Read that again.
Crown land, also known as royal domain, is a territorial area belonging to the monarch who personifies the crown.
It said personify, y'all. Personified means to incarnate for the spooky people, or incorporate for those who understand contract law. Because everybody who's a part of what they call the United States have now been given an identity based off personification. You have to have a legal personhood given to you when you're born. Whether you're born in one of the states, about all the 50 states, you have to have a legal personality deferred upon you, which determines your legal status, which is called standing in law.
Mhm.
So if it says the crown land, which is the crown, is intel, well, what does intel mean? Read that, Council Howard.
Fetail. In English common law, fetail or entail is a form of trust established by deed or settlement, which restricts the sale or inheritance of an estate in real property and prevents the property from being sold, devised by will, or otherwise alienated by the tenant in possession, and instead causes it to pass automatically by operation of law to an heir determined by the settlement deed.
Stop. That's the demise of the crown. Transfer of the sovereign power and attributes of the king to an heir, based off it being intel. Why? Because it's crown land. And crown land is owned by the crown. The crown is personified by the monarch, not the physical person. He dies. But the crown, person who personifies the crown, is immortal. That's why we have always existed through time immemorial. Now let's look up the term "sestu que" to bring it home with what we call the crown. Because everybody keep talking about, oh, the "sestu que," that's our trust. Okay. Now we just told you that the United States, as well as the British government, dissolved the Church of England as established by law. So the only way we can get it back is by law. Operation of law. I'm not going to say it. Case law is going to say it. Says 2K. Read the first paragraph, count it out.
Sestu que is a shortened version of seste que use. Oh, okay.
Archbishop, help
Archbishop, where you at?
Sestu ku, you say, latfioment fuit fayet.
You'd be killing it, boy.
Literally, the person for whose use benefit the fiefment was made, in modern terms, a beneficiary. It is a law, French phrase, and of medieval English invention, which appears in the legal phrases "seste que trust,"
Stop right there. That's fine. Let's go a little further. Read right here.
Any such in trust legal status was partly to circumvent the statute of mortmain, which sought to end the relatively common practice of leaving real property, land, milling rights, markets, fisheries to the church, meaning any of its branches, on the tenant's death, so as to avoid due inquisition post-mortem, which could, unpaid, lead to reversion or possession of the tenancy to the landlord. Two concepts explain the origin of mortmain dead hand. First, it can be characterized as referring to the deceased donor and former owner and their desire in their will that the church inherit. Second, as the church A non-natural person recognized by the common law never dies. The land never leaves its dead hand.
Ooh, y'all better listen. Y'all better listen. Continue.
Before this act, vast tracts of land were left directly to the church, which never relinquished it.
Stop. Town of Paulette, y'all. We just read it. Town of Paulette. They dissolved it and put it in the trust as the Statutes, which we're reading about. Continue.
Other land could be transferred to anyone, inherited only through a family line, sometimes only the male line, or revert to an overlord or the crown upon the death of the tenant. Church land had been a source of contention between the crown and the church for centuries.
For centuries, y'all. That problem stops today. It stops today. Why? Because case law says this. There you go, Henry VIII, Henry VII, the founder of the House of Tudors. Henry VIII dissolved the monastery and all the territory. Yeah, I'm about to blow y'all minds today. Let's read this first case. Town of Paulette. Read that first paragraph.
In the 1815 case of Town of Paulette versus Clark, the United States Supreme Court found that a royal grant of land to the Church of England in the colony of New Hampshire was not completed. The grant had been made prior to the American Revolutionary War, and the state of Vermont, as successor to the English crown, could claim the land and convey it to the town of Paulette for schools. The Statutes nature of the trust which held the land was found to be void. The Episcopal Church in the town had no right or title to that land.
Okay, when they say Episcopal Church, they're talking about the Church of England as established by Henry VIII. Read the Society of Propagation of the Gospel.
In 1823, the 1823 case of Society for the Propagation of the Gospel versus Town of New Haven looked at the issue of land grant to an English corporate body, the Society, which had a religious purpose. The land had been granted by King George III of Great Britain in New Hampshire in 1761. It was held in corporation by a form of Statutes. On 30 October 1794, the state of Vermont passed a statute whereby the land of the society would be appropriated by the state. The Supreme Court was divided in its opinion. It ruled that the property of English corporations at the time of the Revolution were protected by the Treaty of Peace, 1783. The Treaty of Paris, 1783, Treaty of Versailles, 1783. There could be no confiscation of such corporate holding or land because of that treaty.
Okay, so as we can see, 16-1-28 of New Jersey by statute says right state under the charters or right state under the Constitution of Great Britain, saved from repeal, and act to incorporate you, brothers and sisters, as trustees of religious society and for property held by way of certificates of corporations and corporations in place thereof. So corporations are holding the property of the church as established in 16-1-28. And it's our obligation to administer that trust by being commissioned as entrusted, which they have broken through what we call the Commonwealth, which is nothing more than an interregnum or a stay or a gap between the transfer of the sovereignty of the minor, which has now transferred to me as your king. Make sense to everybody?
Follow.
Follow.
All right, so let's get to nitty gritty. United States. Read the first paragraph, Countess Allen. Stop right at the just at the Indian reservations? Read all this.
The United States of America, commonly known as the United States or informally America, is the most populous country in North America. It consists of 50 states, a federal district, 5 major unincorporated territories, 9 minor outlying islands, and 326 Indian reservations.
I'll stop. Okay, so that's all the territories known as what you call the United States of America. Before you had the United States of America, you just had states. Before you had states, you had colonies, and the colonies were known as the 13 colonies that took place on the eastern side of North America and not the western side of North America, because at that time, that was inhabited by France and Spain. Does everybody agree?
Agreed.
Okay, so when you deal with the northeastern side, eastern seaboard, or called the Atlantic coast, that was inhabited by the 13 colonies under what they call the British government, under the British monarch, start with King James. Everybody agree?
Agreed.
Okay, so if it started by King James, and King James is soon to be the first king of England, then we know that when they separated from Great Britain by way of the Declaration of Independence in 1776, they started, once they declared themselves, and then they became a United States in 1787 by way of the Constitution. Then they started declaring, what was it? 1790, they created what they call the Residency Act, which is we get the capital for the United States of America, which is called the Federal District. Because it says here, was the capital of the United States of America? What's the capital, y'all?
Washington, D.C.
Washington, D.C.
Does Washington, D.C. have an official language?
No,
Does it have a national language?
yes,
Yes,
Yes.
What is the national language?
English,
English,
But is it de jure or de facto?
de
de
facto,
facto.
Why
Says
is it
right
de
there.
facto?
because there's no English nationals.
I hope y'all watching this online. She just told you, only people you got over here is white, black, Asian, Native American, Pacific Islander, and other multiracial, which speaks a spoken language or national language or official language, but not here in America, not here in the United States, or not in the States, because they had no official language of their own. So therefore, the de facto language they speak is English. Everybody understand?
Correct.
How do you get in this picture? Because the King James was supposed to be English monarchs, because the first monarch, according to their story, was King James. Am I right? Everybody agree, right? He was the first king of England and the sixth king of Scotland.
Agreed.
But that was under a rump parliament. Under a rump parliament, under what we call divine rights of kings, which means that God gave him the right to become king. He didn't get it from an heir. At the demise of the crown says you're supposed to get it. At the king's demise. He claimed God gave it to him, and I ain't no God right to this day came out of the cloud and said, I deem you to be king. I'm not claiming to be the divine king, divine right by God. I'm claiming to be a king by way of our ancestors going back to Godfrey the fifth Count of Anjou. That's where my right to become king. How I prove it? Let's get to it. All right. So if the United States has no national language, no official language, because it's a stateless nation and it's the seat of the government, we're supposed to have an official language, because we know official language is the government based off the judicial, legislative, or administrative. And we know that the United States government is not legislative, nor is it judicially sound. Why? Because it's administrative. How I know that? Let's go to the capital city. I don't know why we ain't never seen it before, but you're gonna see it today. Washington, D.C. is a federal district, which means it's a municipality.
Mhm,
If it's a municipality, it's an administrative government.
mhm.
Not a constitutional government, but an administrative government. How do we know that? Look at the flag. Why don't the United States government and the United States, which consists of the 50 states, have the same flag for the seat of government? That's a different flag.
Velocity.
Now read what this says in closing, Countess Allen. Right.
The U.S. Constitution provides for a federal district under the exclusive jurisdiction of Congress. The district is not a party of any U.S. state, nor is it one itself. The signing of the Residence Act on July 16, 1790, approved the creation of the Capital District located along the Potomac River near the country's east coast.
Stop. So it said it's not a state, nor is it considered, this is not part of any state, nor is it considered a state itself. We know that because you don't have a national language, nor official language. So you're stateless. Everybody agree?
Great.
Follow.
All right. So now if it's stateless, it's not a nation. So who owns the land? Because the seat of the government in Washington, D.C. is not the flag of the United States. It's a flag of who? Anybody know who it is?
Lawrence Washington.
There you go, boy. That's what I'm talking about. And for that, you get to read.
I'm at
Go ahead
work,
and read
I
it to him,
can't.
Brother Gray.
I can't, I'm at work.
Dad, well, you shouldn't have said nothing, man.
I'm sorry.
All right, I'm just playing with you, brother. Continue. All right. So, Countess Walker was just reading. We're going to go back to Countess Albert's reading. We're going back to Countess Walker. Brothers, I just like to hear the sisters read. They read clearer. You can hear them, so don't be biased. You know what I'm saying? I got work for y'all too, but we're going to let the sisters do this reading. All right, go ahead, Countess Walker.
The flag of Washington, D.C. consists of 3 red stars above 2 bars on a white background. It is an armorial banner based on the design of the coats of arms granted to George Washington's great-great-great-grandfather, Lawrence Washington of Seagrave Manor, Northamptonshire, England in 1592. This
Stop right there. Stop right there. Let's go ahead. History. Where's it at? Okay. Go right here. Washington family, you see the same banner. Let's go here to roots. Read that, roots.
The Washington dynasty traces its direct, firmly confirmed roots ultimately to the Tran of Dunkeld, lay abbot and stepson of Malcolm II of Scotland.
Stop. So Washington is connected to the kings of Scotland. We can make that assumption, can't we?
Follow.
Continue to read.
His descendant was Sir William D. Hertburn, William Bayard, who in 1183 traded his manor of Hertburn, modern day Hartburn, for that of Westington in County Dunham, near River Ware. William the Conqueror had awarded estates to many nobles associated with the new Norman realm regime, and especially in the Hertburn region after the herring of North suppressed the
Northumbrians.
Okay, according to the post-conquest noble custom, well before surnames became commonplace.
Okay, yeah. Well before surnames became what?
Commonplace in English culture.
Stop
They
right there.
adopted
Stop right there. Let's go ahead now. Read here. Washington manners and onward.
the direct ancestral home of the Washington family from 1180 to 1613 is Washington Old Hall, a manor house located in the center of the Washington area of Tyne and Wear, England. It is owned by the National Trust. During the early 14th century, Robert D. Washington, a descendant of William D. Westington, settled in Wharton, Lancashire. Lawrence Washington, a descendant of Robert, moved from Wharton to Northamptonshire in 1539, where he became a prosperous wool merchant. In 1539, during the Reformation, Henry VIII enacted the dissolution of monasteries in England. Lawrence acquired from the King Sirgrave Manor on Northampton Priory of St. Andrew. Lawrence became construction of a new manor house on his property. Sirgrave Manor was completed in 1560 and remained in the Washington family until 1610. Lawrence Washington's great-grandson, Lawrence Washington, 1602 to 1652, the immigrant's father, was a noble English rector whose brother, Sir William Washington, married the half-sister of George Villiers, first Duke of Buckingham. The Washington family, who were loyalists to Charles I, fell out of grace during the English Civil War. Oliver Cromwell forced the Washington family to be dispossessed of their land. The harsh treatment of the Washington family under Cromwellian's rule may have forced Lawrence's son, John Washington, to leave England and seek better prospects in America.
Okay, hold on. Something wrong with this picture. How in the hell could your land be taken from Oliver Cromwell under the rump parliament called the Commonwealth? You never had no land because under the Commonwealth, it was disposed by parliament because of those pretenders. Everybody agree? We just read it. And it said that, why? Because all the church property was dissolved in the dissolution of the monastery by Henry VIII.
Mm-hmm.
So it said that John Washington went over to America to seek better prospects because the land given to him by Lawrence Washington was seized by Cromwellians under Oliver Cromwell under what we call the Commonwealth. And the Commonwealth is called an interregnum, a gap between the minors. Now, why is this so? Let's find out who Lawrence Washington is. Continue to read.
Lawrence Washington, 1602 to January the 21st, 1652, was a high church rector of the Church of England. He was an early ancestor to the Washington family of Virginia, being the great-great-grandfather of the U.S. President, George Washington.
Okay, so George Washington, where the government of the United States is ran by and has a flag name representing it, is actually an armorial banner of a descendant of George Washington, which is Lawrence Washington, going back to 1602. King James became king in 1603. So they're in the same year. Everybody agree? And this guy, his great-great-grandfather is a high rector of the Church of England. And we know the Church of England was dissolved by who? Henry VIII. Does everybody follow?
Right.
Okay, so if King James claimed all the territory on the eastern seaboard under jurisdiction of the crown, and we know that he was a British monarch, a British and Scottish monarch, and he know his descendants goes back to Lawrence Washington, who was affiliated with the Church of England, which was dissolved by the United States and the British crown, which he's the partakers of. So who actually owned this land then? Because before Charles II restored to the crown, this land belongs to the Dutch.
Right.
So the gap or the missing link is the Dutch story, because the Anglo had wars with the Dutch way before the British even came to existence. Let's go back and make sure. Anglo-French wars. There we go. Anglo-French, let's go all the way up the ladder and get to the 1600s. 1649, right here. Second Anglo-Dutch War. Dutch Republic. Now let's go to New Jersey in my closing. Hold on, before we go there. Come on. Okay, let's go ahead. Province of New Jersey. Everybody see that?
Provincial
Yes.
Council.
Yes, read that, Countess.
The New Jersey Provincial Council was the upper house of the New Jersey legislature under colonial rule until it was replaced by the New Jersey Legislative Council under the New Jersey Constitution of 1776.
Okay. Now, what type of authority is the New Jersey Provincial Council function under?
The Crown.
The Crown, right? The length of the Crown rule is what? Indefinite. So if it's indefinite, why did it stop? Because, let's read it for ourselves.
The Provincial Council was established in 1702 under the surrender by the proprietors of East New Jersey and those of West Jersey of the right of government to Queen Anne. Anne's government united the two colonies as a province of New Jersey, a royal colony, establishing a new system of government. The instructions from Queen Anne to Viscount Cornbury, the first royal governor of New Jersey, outline a fusion of powers system, which allowed for the overlap of executive, legislature, and judicial authority. It provided for a bicameral legislature consisting of a council and general assembly. On December 6, 1775, Governor William Franklin prorogued the New Jersey legislature until January 3rd, 1776, but it never met again. On May 30th, 1776, Franklin attempted to convene the legislature, but was met instead with an order by the New Jersey Provincial Congress for his arrest. On July 2nd, 1776, the Provincial Congress approved a new constitution, and on August 13th, a new legislature was elected, with the appointed Provincial Council being succeeded by the elected New Jersey Legislative Council.
Okay, so we know that the Provincial Council was under authority of the Crown. So let's go back to the demise of the Crown, because that was in 1702. Didn't it say that, 1702? Look at the Demise of the Crown Act of 1702. So the same year they took it, the same year Queen Anne enacted the Demise of the Crown Act, and read what that says.
The Demise of the Crown Act of 1702. First and C2 is an act of Parliament of England. It is partly still in force. It abolished the rule that all legislative proceedings automatically came to an end with the death of the monarch.
Let's qualify that by King George III. This is from King George III. Queen Anne passed that Demise of the Crown in 1702. Now, King George passed the same act in 1706, or 1760, I mean. King George III, right here, Judicial Commission not to cease on Demise of the Crown. Read that.
Be it enacted by the King's most excellent majesty, by and with the advice and counsel of lords, spiritual and temporal, and commons in this present Parliament assembled, and by the authority of the same, that all persons who were justices of the peace at the time of the demise of his said late majesty, King George II, or who shall be justices of the peace at the time of the demise of his present majesty, or any of his successors, kings or queens of this realm, or shall afterwards be appointed justices of the peace by any commission granted, or which shall be granted by his said present majesty, or which after his demise shall be granted by any of his successors, kings or queens of this realm, and who shall take.
Stop right there. So that's actually saying the same thing that King Edward just said and the Judicial and the Justice of the Peace Act, because it said, you mentioned Justice of the Peace. Let's go back to Edward III. Right there. Where is that? An act concerning the justice of the peace. He said the same thing in this, the same thing that King George III is saying, that they ought to continue as if the demise of the crown never took place. So that means the power is indefinite, perpetual. Now, why was the Interregnum instituted by what we say the kings of England, from King James all the way down to Duke of York, all the way down to Queen Elizabeth II, who's ruling now, because of this right here. When it switched over to what they call New Jersey, state of New Jersey, we go here. One second. Where did it go? I thought I had it in, but we type it in. And this will be in closing. If you all paid attention to our previous lessons, then you won't have a problem understanding this one. New Jersey. We already went through the United States, and it lacks its stateless. New Jersey is also a stateless nation as well. Everybody see that?
Yes, see it.
Yep.
Okay. New Jersey, we're just gonna go right to the box. Country, United States. Before statehood, it was the province of New Jersey. Province of New Jersey from 1664, that was under the proprietary colony. Before they had it, New Netherlands had it, or the Dutch had it. The province of New Jersey was ruled by the Provincial Council, which we just read, which was under the authority of the Crown. Once it was dissolved by William Livingston, they moved it from Perth Amboy to Trenton, which is administrative jurisdiction, now called New Jersey legislation. Now let's go back. Under New Jersey legislation or legislative council, it says here, New Jersey is a state in mid-Atlantic northeastern region of the United States. If you go here in the box, it said before statehood was called the province of New Jersey. Capital city is Trenton. Why? Because they said when the crown was dissolved, they moved it to Trenton. So the capital of the state, the city, the municipality, or the capital city of New Jersey is in Trenton. That was the act of the Interregnum. Now, before New Jersey had it, let's go ahead. It said it was under the jurisdiction of New Netherland. Let me go ahead and call it this. Colonial era. The Dutch were the first Europeans to lay claim to the lands in New Jersey. So let's hit the New Netherland. New Netherland. New Netherland or Netherlander was a 17th century colonial province of the Dutch Republic that was located on the east coast of what is now called the United States. So the Dutch Republic, it was located on the east coast, what we call the United States, which we now call the 13 colonies. So before the 13 colonies existed, it was the Dutch Republic. Everybody agree?
Agree.
Agreed.
So that means King James didn't have no claim over here prior to the Dutch. And we go back to the Anglo and Dutch War. So the person who had a more conclusive claim was the Anglo-Saxons, other than contrast to the British colonies under the British Crown. So in order to qualify that, we got to find out who was here before New Netherland. So let's find that out. Now they try to say the ones who were here before New Netherland was the Lenape-Hoking, a Native American tribe. That's bull crap. Let's prove it. Let's go back to New Jersey. It says New Jersey was under the control of the Netherlands. We go back to Netherlands. Netherlands was controlled by the Dutch provinces, which is the Dutch Republic. We click Dutch Republic. You click Dutch Republic, who ruled before them? Spanish Netherlands. The same word, Netherlands. You got the Dutch Netherlands. Now you got the Spanish Netherlands who preceded them. You have the Habsburg of Spain. So we go there. Let's get them. Who preceded them? Who preceded them? Hold on, I messed up somewhere. Let me go back one. So you get to, this is Spanish Netherlands, then we go here. Habsburg Netherlands, right here. Go here. Still got the word Netherlands. The word Netherlands means what? Lowlander. You ever heard the term neither world or the underworld? That's where that term comes from. Netherlands or the underworld. All right. So who succeeded the Habsburg Netherlands? The Burgundian Netherlands. Let's click that. Now remember, we're still dealing with the East Coast here. Starting from Netherlands all the way to the Burgundian Netherlands, which is all connected. Where do they descend down from? The counties of Flanders. Let's kick that. Oh, we getting close. Who are the counties of Flanders? The counties of Flanders is ruled by who? Baldwin the First. Let's go to Baldwin the First. Baldwin the First, Margrave of Flanders, was married to who? Judith of Flanders. Read that. Count us out.
Elopement with princess. At the time Baldwin first appears in the records, he was already a count, presumably in the area of Flanders. But this is not known. Count Baldwin rose to prominence when he eloped with Judith, daughter of Charles the Bald, King of West Francia. Judith had previously been married to Ethelwulf and Ethelbald, kings of Wessex, but after the latter's death in 860, she returned to France.
Okay, so who is Ethelwulf? Let's find out. His spouse, Judith of Flanders. Let's click out Alfred the Great. Alfred the Great was the first king. Alfred the Great means wise elf. Read that first paragraph.
Alfred the Great was king of the West Saxons from 871 to 876 and king of the Anglo-Saxons from 886 until his death in 899. He was the youngest son of King Ethelwulf and his first wife, Osburh, who had died when Alfred was young. 3 of Alfred's brothers, Ethelbald, Ethelbert, Ethelred, reigned and turned before him. Under Alfred's rule, considerable administrative and military reforms were introduced, prompting lasting change in England.
Okay, so we see Alfred the Great, father was who? Ethelwulf. Ethelwulf's spouse was Judith of Flanders. Judith of Flanders was from the House of Flanders. Let's go back there. And I come to my closes. Back to Judith of Flanders. Judith of Flanders was associated with the House of Flanders. And you go here, Judith of Flanders. Matter of fact, I can do it even better. Everybody see the movie Kingdom of Heaven, right?
Yes.
House of IBL. Evelyn. So we traced Alfred the Great all the way to the eastern seaboard, and his father was married to Judith of Flanders from the House of Flanders. Now we're dealing with the House of Evelyn. The House of Evelyn was established by Fulk V. Read the first paragraph.
The House of Evelyn was a noble family in the Crusader Kingdom of Jerusalem in the 12th century. They rose from humble beginnings to become one of the most important families in the kingdom, holding various high offices and with extensive holdings in the Holy Land and Cyprus. The family disappeared after the fall of the Kingdom of Cyprus in the 15th century.
Okay. Now remember, keyword, Kingdom of Jerusalem. But before we click that, let's just go to read that first paragraph.
The family took their name from the castle of Evelyn, which was built in 1141 by King Fulk I and entrusted to Baracin, the founder of the family. Evelyn was the Crusaders' name for the Arab city of Abina, where the castle was situated. The castle fell to the Saracens at the end of the 12th century, but by then the family had holdings at Beirut and in Cyprus.
That goes into the movie with Saladin, Kingdom of Heaven. Now, it said that the castle of Evelyn was built by Fulk I. Let's see who Fulk I is. Read that first paragraph.
Fulk, 1089, 1092, also known as Fulk the Younger, was the Count of Anjou as Fulk V from 1109 to 1129, and the King of Jerusalem with his wife from 1131 to his death. During their reign, the Kingdom of Jerusalem reached its largest territorial extent.
Okay, so at the King of Jerusalem, that the Kingdom of England grew to its furthest extent under Godfrey, the fifth Count of Anjou. So who is this Godfrey? Right here. Godfrey the Plantagenet. That's who I descend down from. Who is his father? Fulk, the King of Jerusalem. Everybody see that? Let's go to the King of Jerusalem. Who were the kings of Jerusalem? Let's see. King of Jerusalem. The first king of Jerusalem was who? Godfrey of Bouillon. Godfrey of Bouillon was the son of Eustace II. Right here. A Bouillon from the House of Flanders. Let's look at it. Everybody see that? House of Flanders. Eustace II from the House of Flanders married who? Golda of England. She was the daughter of Ethelred the Unready.
So point of interest, which has been shown, was that no matter what, it was had to be a descendant of God, i.e. from the Kingdom of Jerusalem, who was going to have to do it based off of agnatic succession as being heir to the Kingdom of Jerusalem.
Exactly. Because it says here, Godgifu was the daughter of King Ethelred the Unready and his second wife, Emma of Normandy, and sister of King Edward the Confessor. King Ethelred was the son of King Edward the Peaceful, who I am the reincarnation of. So there you have it, brothers and sisters, a clear, correct, cut bloodline of the descendants of the Kingdom of Jerusalem, and that's why New Jersey is called the Garden of Eden, the Garden City, Jerusalem. And the only way we can be able to take our state back is by fulfilling the requirement of the language of the law, and the language of the law governs the language of the proceedings, and it also holds those justices of peace to enforce the language of the proceedings governed by the language of the law, hold what we call the King's Peace. And with that, I digress. Queen, you got the floor.
Well, there you have another lesson from the king. I'm always amazed because he has such a way of, the way he don't study, it just comes to him. Like, and the way he ties it all in, you know, is just amazing. But I just find it interesting about the District of Columbia. I had no idea that they had their own flag and how it all tied into George Washington. And it's just, there are no strange happenings. It just so happened that today I was reading December 4th in 1783 was the same day that George Washington said farewell to his so-called soldiers after the Revolutionary War in the state of New York, Sister Walker. And, you know, with the king talking about the, George Washington with the District of Columbia, and then also with the state of New Jersey being named officially, the state of New Jersey happened in 1783 as well. But just a beautiful lesson on the language of English, the official language versus the administrative language. And my daughter called me this morning. She said that my grandbaby has a homework assignment.
Yeah, so
I asked my daughter, I said, well, what is the subject about? And my daughter said, social studies. So right then and there, the king jumped in and he said, oh,
I got that.
social studies, I got that one.
I got her covered. They're gonna kick her out of class.
So I know she's in for a nice treat because, you know, if you read up, social studies is actually teachings of, supposed to be, of history, and the different languages of the different cultures and, you know, how all that stuff ties in. So she's in for a good treat with that one. And I know her teacher is gonna look at her and be amazed once the king gets finished with her on that social studies lesson. And I just find it ironic also about how we talked about the Commonwealth. And that means that things are actually so-called laying in a state of dormancy with the Commonwealth. And like you said, if they're claiming that it's a Commonwealth, then who's in charge? For all our brothers and sisters out there, wake up.
Yeah.
We've been sleeping for way too long. It's time for us to raise our conscious levels and study, because like I said, we're running out of time. I always talk about the state of the world that we're in today. We don't have any time. For all those who's willing to listen and take heed to all these lessons, I know a lot of people out there, they really don't have time to sit and listen to the demonstrations because they're running this way and that way. A lot of people are living day to day, just trying to survive, you know, and by the time they get done with doing things that they need to do to survive, just to eat and sleep is a big, you know, tassel for them.
Yeah, take the most of their life.
What time is there for them to study? And a lot of people don't have the means to study. You know, having access to laptops or the internet and different things like that. I just wish that there was a way for us to go out to the streets and demonstrate to these people. I know that when the king was into the Moors, we used to go out and demonstrate on the streets.
Yeah.
I just think we need to get back into that as well, because like I said, a lot of people don't have access to watch these lessons online. With that, I digress.
Well said, Queen. And it's great that she said that because it puts me in mind of a brother, Brother Mings, who's going to give his dissertation today, because it shows you by him being able to give his presentation today is that he's conforming to the language. He's conforming to the law because he understands history. So without further ado, let's greet him and humble ourselves as he makes his way back home to the English Territory Church to honor his fathers and his mothers, his ancestors, as we all have done, who have made the same stride he's done. So with that, I give the floor to Archbishop, and you now have the panel.
All right. Once again, great job, King Clifford Jefferson, from the Royal House of Plantagenet, for this marvelous lesson that the ancestors have endowed and anointed him to be able to bring to the earthly plane. And not only is he the King of England, but as he's shown you, he's the King of Jerusalem, the Kingdom of Jerusalem, the DEJURE Jerusalem. And it's been shown that either from the Dutch to the English to the British or whoever, everyone was trying to set in the capital for the coming of the King of Heaven, who has now returned via agnatic succession, as which the King has been showing, through devotion as well through which we call autobiological memory, which is engrams, because only he who has the proper chemistry or biochemistry, and we're going to call it in this matter, can actually do this work. And as we've seen, the ancestors have done a marvelous job. And with that saying, like what the Queen was speaking regarding us coming out into the streets and actually start teaching the people who need to start actually seeing the angels return, because the angels, like all prophecy said, were going to come at the end of an age, especially when the people needed the most to save a lost nation. And in this case, the King have shown that the nations that we're dealing with is a stateless nation that's utilizing our language, and that stateless nation is the United States. And everyone who's considered a citizen of the so-called United States have made themselves stateless or non-inheritable, non-descendable, excuse me. So you've now made yourself a legal alien who was considered a legal stranger amongst everyone among you. And the only way how you have some type of connection or communication is by utilizing the English language, but you're not utilizing it as of being a de jure heir. You're utilizing it as being a property or ward of the United States via an administrative rule. So you're nothing more than administrative property. And the only way for these administrative heirs or wards can come back to heaven, you have to come through the church, because through the church is what you failed, and through the church what you must return. Like the Queen was saying, everyone is being pulled many directions, and you've been pulled many directions that now cause you to become a nonconformist. So you cannot conform to your true body politics, which the King has shown you have always existed. It's never been eradicated. It's technically never been abolished, because the King never dies. What we're showing you is that our brothers and sisters have chose to not honor their body politic, because all of this stuff has always been here. King George III left it intact, after he ceded it over to the so-called United States, who claiming to be what? Trustees. Why? Because they're claiming to have ancestorship that goes back to England. So somebody got to keep this script going on until the King returns. And as you've seen, they had done a great job to keep imposters from actually taking what is actually the de jure heirs. And they're not going to let anyone come on in and say, hey, I'm the king, I got this ship. No, you got to prove us who you are, because we ain't about to let it go as easily as we had took it away from the true heirs. So as you see, that's why we have to do what we're doing now. And as you've shown, no one else has the remedy. The remedy was within your blood, and your blood is not bringing you back this way, then you don't have it at all. And so go ahead, King.
Yeah, and Lou, what you just said, that goes back to autobiological memory, because most of us, when we write about ourselves, we write an autobiography about ourselves, but you have no identity with your own self. You come from somebody else. So we have to give honor to Brother Ming for writing his autobiological memory, not just for himself, but everybody else associated through his surname. So we give honor for you to take that courage and that step for being able to speak on behalf of all those who carry the surname Mings. And with that, I digress. Archbishop.
Well said, King. And to end this service, before we go ahead and go into the dissertation, I'm going to have a 15-minute break so everyone can refresh themselves and get prepared for this marvelous coronation to welcome Brother Means from the House of Means into the Third Temple English Church of England with his oral dissertation. So with that being said, we love you and we digress, and hopefully everyone, heed this message, because without the King, we will not have no salvation.
And we ain't going nowhere, just a pause. Everybody I see here, you better be here when we get back. All right, so we'll see y'all in 15 minutes.
All right, peace and love.
All right.